Hi, I'm Feroz Khan, and welcome to Drag and Drop Low Code Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the game changing impact of low code in software development. Join me in insightful conversations with IT leaders and passionate low code enthusiasts who are at the forefront of this digital evolution. Together, we'll explore how early adoption of low code is giving businesses a competitive edge on a global scale. We'll discuss its impact on software development, dissect its role in transforming businesses, and uncover the ways in which it's reshaping career trajectories. So whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a curious enthusiast, be sure to tune in as we share success stories and unravel the mysteries of low code. Subscribe now and stay tuned for a front row seat to the revolution that's shaping the future of technology. So let's go. Hi Sunny, how are you?
Hey, yeah, not bad. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest.
That's all right. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We're in England, so it'd be wrong for me not to talk about the great summer we're having at the moment.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible right now. It'd be great to start with you giving a bit of a introduction to yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, I'm Sunny Badwal. I'm born and bred in the Midlands, so Derby based. I guess I come from a software engineering background, right? So I think growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something in the IT space. I guess during my academic kind of studies, I was introduced to computing. So I think that's kind of where I've kind of gone and then kind of continued to study in that space. I think in my childhood growing up, I was always kind of fascinated with building things. So yeah, building things, probably breaking things. So,
Yeah.
taking things apart, just being curious about how things actually work. And, there's been many, many stories of me breaking things because I just couldn't figure out how to put it back together, right? But yeah, I guess this kind of curiosity of how things work. And if you probably asked me at age 10 what I wanted to be, I would have probably said something like a magician, right? Because I just had this innate desire to be able to like amaze people, surprise people, show the art of the possible. And I think I've kind of taken that in my professional life. And so, I just do it with digital technology now. But yeah, I guess what motivates me is all about kind of being able to take something pretty average or mediocre and add value and, really realize kind of my vision or kind of creative sense. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. And at what age did you kind of know tech was the way obviously you had an interest in it, but, people can have an interest and still go in a different direction. When did you kind of decide that that's the direction you're going to follow?
So I think at school, it was probably the thing I was just best at, right? So I think, growing up, I did IT and
Yeah.
I was always, I think because I grew up around, kind of had my brother also kind of was kind of into IT at the time. He didn't go into IT, but,
Yeah.
he was always finding a computer. So we had computers at home. And when I got to school, it was just so easy, right? So I kind of finished my work and start playing games and that would disrupt the class and, not very good. But I just kind of thought like, I don't have that in other subjects, right? I wasn't that good at science or any of that kind of stuff. So I was just like, this is probably something I want to go into. But then it was at A level that I was introduced to this computer software, I guess you can call it. And that wasn't so easy, right? So I quite struggled with it. And you'd think, I remember my A levels, I didn't get a good grade at computing at all. And then I'm kind of contemplating, should I even do computer science at university? I might just fail, right? But I think for me, it was, because I have this kind of interest in it, I'll probably follow through and it'll be all right. So I think I went with it and I'm thankful I went with it.
Luckily it worked out. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And when you were studying computer science, obviously it's we'll get into the low code side later on, but you learn a lot of traditional development. So what was kind of what technologies were you working with, learning, and which ones were kind of piquing your interest?
Yeah. So I started with Python, which kind of feels like we've done full circle, right? Because everyone's learning Python again, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of started with Python as a kind of introduction to programming. And I remember in my A levels, we kind of built this mini app using a really basic UI. And I think I built something to do with cricket at the time. But yeah, I guess started in Python, and then at university it was all around, I guess, Java And then I guess at some point in your third year, you get to choose some modules, which I kind of went into web dev. But yeah, I think an introduction into kind of, and I guess you go through a bunch of different programming languages depending on what's relevant at the time, but fundamentally the kind of skills are the same. Syntax might change, but fundamentally it's all kind of very similar. So yeah, I think at university, they had a set syllabus, which was kind of good to see and see how, and see where I kind of naturally fit. I think web dev was always my interest. I think at the time there was this kind of app bubble. So I guess I went to university in 2011, graduated around 2015. Yeah, apps were the big thing. So I was kind of like, I want to learn how to build iOS apps. So I kind of got into Swift in my later journey, which was in its infancy. I think I used Swift version 1. I don't know what they're at now, but
And when you started working, you obviously, we'll speak about you currently work for Rolls-Royce, but prior to that, what was your kind of first job out of university?
So actually, my university course actually was a sandwich kind of course. So we did a year in placement. So I was, thankfully got a placement at a French defense company called Thales. So, that was really my first look at, corporate life. I'd been learning for 2 years around, software, and this was the first time I got to see it in practice. So I really enjoyed that year. It was based down in Crawley, which is near Gatwick Airport. But yeah, I got the opportunity to work on, different projects from there was a project called Watchkeeper, which is a UAV that was kind of flown kind of autonomously in the air. And yeah, really great first look at what it would feel to use some of these techniques in the real life. But I think more than that, what I learned the most in that placement was more around discipline, right? I was surrounded by some of the smartest people in the world.
Yeah.
And, these guys are doing some really, really complex stuff. And up until that point, I felt like my mindset was a bit different. I've since read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, right? And I think that really resonated with me, because I felt at that point I was kind of like, I was there and not really appreciating where I was. Like, not everyone gets this opportunity to be around these really, really clever people, right? And so I think from there, my mindset changed a little, and I went back to university. But my first 2 years, I didn't do so well. And I went back to university with a slightly different mindset of, if I want to compete in this world and I want to go back to a company like that and be, with some of the leaders in this industry, then I need to get good grades, right? So yeah, I think that was my first role. And then I guess after I graduated, I kind of looked for some roles in kind of software, but I felt like I needed to just do my own thing for a bit. So I freelanced for around 18 months. I built my own apps. I released some of them in the App Store, just going through that process of how does this actually work in the real world. So yeah, some of them did well. It was weird. The ones I thought would do well, literally no one liked. And the like novelty ones were the ones that everyone was downloading. And I was like, it's a weird world out there. But it was a great learning.
What apps were they?
So it was just like, so the main one was this kind of, the one I thought would do really well was it would kind of web scrape all the jobs for graduates, which was kind of relevant at the time.
Yeah.
Put it in a single app, and no one was really doing it in the app space. There was websites that did it, but never on a mobile device. That didn't do very well at all. In fact, just didn't catch on. And then there were some random ones around football. So I'm a Man United fan. So
no. I'm an Arsenal fan. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, some like football ones did quite well. I built this app which kind of taught you how to play blackjack. So there's a strategy to blackjack called Perfect Blackjack, I think it's called. But yeah, it's kind of like a trainer app, which surprising that was a paid one, which kind of did quite well. So yeah, it was good to see what the industry was doing. But yeah, I think for me it was just, how do I take an idea in my mind and kind of realize it out, build it out, and then get it into an app store that's now available to millions of people on a mobile device. So
that's cool. That's really cool. And then when did you decide kind of, it's time to go, join someone and kind of build up your career that way?
Yeah, so like around 18 months after that, I was kind of like, probably want to join, get some regular income. I mean, these apps did okay, but you're really relying on ad revenue or sales. And so, yeah, I think I'd kind of find my space a little bit. And I said I'm from Derby, and Rolls-Royce is the biggest employer in Derby, so it felt like a natural fit for me to join Rolls-Royce at the time. And thankfully, they had this early careers kind of program open for kind of newly graduated people, which I joined in a software engineering kind of software verification role, so kind of testing. Where very safety critical engineering, so very different to what I was doing, I guess, in that kind of creativity app space. But really, my first look at aviation, right? I've always had a fascination with aeroplanes, right? I think you go on. I remember going on holiday and just staring at aeroplanes and just thinking it's amazing how these massive kind of aeroplanes can lift off the ground. And I kind of wanted to be a pilot, but I'm colorblind, so apparently that's a no-go. Probably
it is.
But yeah, that was it. So yeah, I guess joined Rolls-Royce, safety critical engineering. Spent around 2.5 years doing that. So it was very much command line kind of tools. Making sure the engine's safe. So I guess anytime an engine, the software on an engine changes, there's a bunch of regulation that goes along with that. And I was part of a team of around 10, which kind of did software verification. So before it went out on a flying test bed, would make sure everything's cool. So yeah, really, really good. Learned a lot around aerospace as an industry in general.
And when was it kind of you first were kind of made aware of low code or came across low code?
So I guess after that, so I joined in a safety critical role, and then 2.5 years into that, I kind of felt like I wanted to do something more creative again.
Yeah.
So I was just looking around, I guess, outside of Rolls-Royce, because I never knew Rolls-Royce Digital as a function existed, weirdly enough. But yeah, I guess I found a role within Rolls-Royce, which was kind of all to do with UX, or user experience. And I joined Rolls-Royce Digital in 2019, late 2019. So it's like literally 4 or 5 months before COVID happened, and we all kind of went into lockdown. I spent about a year doing that, and it was around that time. So I'd probably say early 2020.
Okay.
Our CDIO was kind of like, we need to play in this low code space. It was more around data democratization. But he'd seen successes in other companies, other roles that he'd been in, and so really there was this talk around, we're going to put a team together to kind of deploy a self-service platform. And I was kind of like, this is really where I feel like I play, right? I have experience in app dev, and it seemed like a good fit. Thankfully, the person leading that, who's my current manager now as well, agreed. So, that's kind of where I was first introduced to it. So yeah, we went down this kind of just looking at what's out there, right? It was very new to me. I didn't know these tools existed at all, right? I think even the term citizen developer at the time, I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
We had to go through this journey of explaining it to others, but felt like we probably need to understand it ourselves first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was probably 2020 we first kind of got introduced to it, and we went through a whole down selection process of let's see what tools are out there.
Yeah.
And kind of which ones make sense for our organization, I think, more importantly.
Yeah. So which one did you start with?
So we had two, right? So we had Mendix was the first one that we looked at, and then the other, I guess, the other alternative was the Microsoft Power Platform.
Yep.
And I think for us, so Rolls-Royce is historically, we're a Microsoft house, right? So we use the whole Microsoft. We already had Dynamics at the time. We use M365. Azure is our cloud provider. So, we are very much, a Microsoft house.
Yeah.
So, I guess those two were the two we started on. We actually trained in both of them. So we had a working group of people who were just interested in the space or wanted to know more. Kind of went on training. We did a bit of Mendix training. We got started on a kind of test environment in Power Platform. And I think at the time I think our ambition was to really grow this out and scale from the start. So I work in the civil aerospace business, right? So we have around 22,000 colleagues.
Wow.
I think for us, at the time we felt the Power Platform was probably closer to the tool set that these people were already using. They were already in Excel, they're in SharePoint. So we decided to go down the Power Platform route initially, but I think, we're going to talk about it. There's definitely space for both, right?
Yeah.
I think both are able to coexist, and we've seen many success stories on organizations that are using both.
Yeah. And when you kind of, obviously when you heard about it, you were kind of really interested to kind of get involved, how was the kind of reaction to others who kind of, joined the team? Were they kind of as excited to work with the, Power Platform, or there was a bit of kind of resistance?
So I think the way we deployed it was, all of our early adopters were out in the business, right? So they weren't IT people. So I think for them it was around, can I even use this thing, right? It's very new to me. I'm not from a digital space. Am I going to be able to use it? I think the reaction to Power Platform was probably easier because it's a reduced learning curve. Mendix was a bit harder to get kind of onboarded onto. It's more, and I feel like since then there's been this pivot. They don't really pitch it as a sit dev tool anymore. It's now more pro coders. Which I felt like in my mind was where I always saw it, right? I think I liked Mendix over Power Platform because I'm from a software engineering background, right? So naturally I was going to be biased towards it. But I think, for most of them, they were kind of on board. I guess since then we have had some pro coders who kind of have come out or joined the business. And for them, there are frustrations around using a low code platform, right? They're not used to not being able to get into the code. Although I feel like, Microsoft also sees that and they're kind of building these plugins so you can get under the hood in Visual Studio and Visual Code if you want to.
And can you tell us kind of, obviously, we'll get into Mendix, but with Power Platform, what kind of things were you building?
So it's been, I guess, a lot of it. So the flagship was an app called Delay Capture. So basically, if there's a delay on an engine build, it used to be recorded on a paper-based system. And I think the first one kind of came about because of COVID. We weren't, shop floor numbers were reduced drastically. We just couldn't run those processes anymore. So there was this push to move things to more digitalized format. So things like, storing anything paper-based would kind of move into a more digital form. But then since then, we've had all ranges of stuff, right? So there's an app that kind of captures shift handovers. So when, you finish your shift, instead of kind of emailing the next person on shift, you record it in a single place. And then anyone, production leaders, they can all kind of have a look at what's going on. And, they've built in some great automation in there, which kind of says if there's ever a build stop, which is a big thing, right? It means an engine stopped building. Then all the relevant parties are notified and, there's none of this kind of, we didn't know about it or just sending messages in WhatsApp groups or whatever it was, right? We weren't really, I think many organizations just weren't prepared for what COVID was going to kick off, right? One day we're all, in our offices and then there's this kind of, everyone needs to remote work. So there's been a bunch of stuff and then there's been a few productivity ones. So our most popular one right now is one called Kudos, right? So it's you can send anyone a thank you for whatever it is. So it's a nice kind of culture change kind of one. So, anything that you want to thank someone for, you send them a nice kudos, their manager's notified. And then we have in our town halls now, we use it to drive, all the people who've been sent the kudos for the last month or so are kind of appreciated. So a whole range of stuff. But
And did you kind of when Rolls-Royce were building out the teams, was there any challenging with hiring and kind of, can you talk us through kind of that process and challenges you faced?
So I guess probably 2-3 years ago we were looking at increasing the size of our team. We were seeing great adoption throughout our organization, really taking on these tools, and so we felt like it was the right time to kind of scale our approach. And so at that time we did look at recruiting them. I think the biggest challenge for us at that point was in the UK especially, it was just availability of people with those skills. So if we went out and said we want a Power App developer, we just couldn't find them, right? And I think maybe that's changed. Power BI was slightly different. I think Power BI is a bit more mature. So Power BI we could get the talent, but especially with Power Apps and Power Automate, and even if we kept it as a bit more generic of just low code, we really struggled to find talent. I think since then, so I guess what we did do then, we pivoted and we hired a pro coder, and a kind of our approach was a pro coder to then teach how to use these low code tools. But then there was always this kind of concern, or we were quite nervous around, there is a stigma attached to kind of pro coders and low code, and are they going to like it? Because at the end of the day, I want someone to come in and just be unhappy about using these tools, right? We want to make sure that they're kind of happy with what they're doing. I think thankfully the person we did hire is has really fit in well and has kind of adopted it, and actually is pushing for where low code doesn't quite meet the fit. Actually, let's use pro code to supplement that. So it's been a good call, but I think it could have gone either way, right?
And obviously now the business has added Mendix, as a tool. Can you talk us through kind of the reasons of why you thought you needed to kind of go out and look for a kind of another tool to work alongside, Power Platform?
Yeah, so I guess caveat is that we're in the really early stages of Mendix, so we're in a discovery phase as we speak to get Mendix on board. But yeah, effectively, I think it just comes down to growth, right? We've seen amazing growth in the Power Platform over the last 4.5 or so years. We've got a community around 1,000 developers now, and they serve around 6,500 monthly active users who are
Wow.
using the apps and reports that people are building, right? So I think for us, we kind of saw that growth and adoption. And we saw most of the apps actually are kind of office-based apps, and they're what we spoke about, Shift Handover is kind of like a shop floor one, but it doesn't integrate with any of the tools. And Rolls-Royce is a Siemens shop floor. We use all of the Siemens toolsets, so Team Center, Op Center, all of those kind of great manufacturing-based tools, which are owned by Siemens, and Mendix is ultimately also owned by Siemens. So I think for us, Mendix was a perfect natural fit for if you want to integrate with things like Team Center, Op Center. You just wouldn't use Power Platform to do that, I don't think. And actually, you want a bit more robustness and support model around that. And I think that's where Mendix is slightly better in the sense that you can control it. And also, you got pro coders building it, right? So it's not true sit dev. But yeah, I think that was our kind of reasoning behind it. I also feel like, and we spoke about this briefly earlier, right? That we've seen many organizations use both Power Platform and Mendix.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they compete at all. I feel like they are slightly different. They're in different categories. And I think I'll speak to someone about this a couple of months ago, right? I think the Gartner Magic Quadrant kind of groups everyone in this low-code application platforms category. And you've got everyone from OutSystems, Mendix, Power Platform to like ServiceNow. And I feel like
Salesforce
the
and
industry's
everybody.
grown, right? So it needs to be split. I don't know what the answer is, but it feels like we should be comparing apples to apples, right? But yeah, I think they don't really compete in the same space, and I think it was the right time for us as we've matured and our organization now knows what a citizen developer is, and actually you can kind of build these digital solutions yourself. I think it was the right time for us to onboard Mendix.
Yeah, and did you find, obviously we hear a lot with Power Platform, it's a great platform, but there's a ceiling, and once you reach it, there's certain things you cannot do. Where with Mendix, the capability is just huge.
Yeah, so we've had, I guess, cases in the past where we've kind of gone down the Power Platform route, and it's maybe not been the right decision for us because, like you say, there's a ceiling, right? And I know Microsoft is moving more and more towards the, where there are gaps, use things like plugins, which are, ultimately pro-coded components that you can kind of fill those gaps with. But I feel like, yeah, like you say, I think there have been gaps. I think it all comes down to decision trees, right? So we have a really good demand intake process. So if you want to do anything digital, you put it through an app that we've built. It kind of says, what's your problem? What's the value behind it? All of that kind of good stuff. How does this kind of align to the 5-year strategic plan of Rolls-Royce, which is a really important one currently. And then you get all the right people involved. So the business partner will have a look at it and say, is there funding behind it and all of that good stuff. But then we have our enterprise architect, right? And he'll have a look at it and say, or he or she will have a look at it and say, actually, is this something you should be using Mendix or Power Platform for it? Or should this go into an enterprise system? Or is there a COTS product that's already doing it, right? So I think it comes down to that. And I think we had to do some of those kind of, let's start in Power Platform, and actually it wasn't the right decision to learn, where do we play, kind of where do these technologies sit? So yeah, I think as we mature and as Mendix now comes onto the platform as a kind of an option, we'll kind of get more and more of actually Power Platform this isn't suitable for, and actually Mendix is a better fit.
Yeah, and obviously you're very early in your journey, but have you guys kind of, can you talk me through kind of some things you're either decided or planning to kind of build with the platform?
Yeah, so I guess one part of the discovery phase we're going through now is looking at the pilot use case, right? So we've got a list of potential use cases to go to, things like disruption management. So if there's a disruption on the shop floor somewhere, we log it in a system today, an IoT platform, but actually that isn't the right place to log it. It needs to go into its own tool and then integrate with Team Center. So anything that touches some of the Siemens tools we kind of talked about, there are a bunch of use cases. Mendix has kind of run ideation workshops with our business users to really figure out where's the value at. Things like streamlining Team Center where the UI is not great. One concept I really liked that we recently went to a Mendix customer forum, which they really talked about, was this concept of keeping the core clean. I think historically we've, as an organization, and I'm sure many other organizations do this, right? They customize, your source systems or these kind of enterprise tools, and then it makes upgrading them, a multi-million-pound job because it's a nightmare, right? So I think, it's such a great concept to say keep the core clean and then use supplementary technologies like Mendix over the top of it to streamline where maybe there are specific things that the organization needs. So anything where Team Center or Up Center isn't quite as efficient as we like it to be, we're going to look at putting Mendix over the top of it, streamlining that, and making the overall user experience for our shop floor colleagues just better.
Amazing. And obviously, you worked with Power Platform, and then you started kind of playing around with Mendix. I'm interested to know your kind of first kind of impressions of the platform when you kind of played around with it. What was your kind of, what did you think of it?
Yeah, so I think it always felt like for me that the way you were within the Power Platform, it was kind of like you're hacking it together and then you're putting these you're building progress bars and stuff using rectangles. So it's kind of, a very different way to traditional programming, whereas Mendix always felt like, yes, you're going to build these reusable components and you pull in your style sheets, which is, we have a design system called Cobalt. So we've got a lot of collateral already, right? Digital as a function is quite mature. We build, digital twin products that, our customers use, so airlines use, every day. So we have a bunch of collateral that was just so hard to bring into the Power Platform because it has to be, bespoke Power Platform tech. Whereas in Mendix, it feels like it's just more integrated in, traditional programming. So I think for me personally, I really like the fact that we can reuse existing collateral we already have from our style sheets, bring it in, but then also just look at how we scale that, make reusability of components easier for our colleagues. I guess I'm biased, right? Like I said, I'm from a software background, so for me, it always felt like slightly easier. But I get why we kind of went down the Power Platform route initially. I think for the organization, that was the best tool at that time.
And I guess when you're talking about citizen development, Power Platform's the easier platform, like you said, to kind of get people going. Where if you've got Mendix, it's more kind of people like yourself who will be able to pick it up a lot quicker compared to kind of the business side.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to pitch it, right? I think for us, we'll pitch it as, we've got a community of citizen developers, and I think out of those super users in that community, they'll really thrive on Mendix because they're the ones who are coming to us saying, actually, we're trying to do this, or, it's not quite working in the Power Platform, or there are alternatives. And I think it'll be a mix of, the super users from our Power Platform sit dev community mixed with a bunch of, we do have pro coders at Rolls-Royce, right? We have a bunch of super smart engineers who, can use Python, can use programming language, have built their own kind of locally built applications that, just now need to be a bit more productionized. So I think it'll be a mix, which is why I say I don't think the community is quite the same. It'll be a similar community, but, we're going to see a load more join. So we have 1,000 sit devs today. We see that growing, with the addition of Mendix.
Yeah. And, I'm interested to know if you've kind of, because you have hired pro devs kind of within the team, have you had any cases where someone's been kind of quite skeptical to start with and now they're kind of fully on board and really kind of all for it?
So I think in the Power Platform space, so our pro coder that we did hire, I think now that we've opened up the option to also add pro code, I think, any of those concerns around, this isn't going to stretch as far have kind of been removed. But I think in the early stages, it was almost like you have to retrain your mind on how you build these apps. Yeah. I think he's quite happy with the fact that we're bringing Mendix on board, right? Because it's more, I guess, similar to me. It's more aligned to, what he's used to. But yeah, absolutely. I think the more skepticism we've had are around people who are moving from Excel, right? They were just so used to their way to work. So that for them, it was, I don't understand what this tool gives me that kind of Excel doesn't. That makes sense. And I think for us, and also there was a slight barrier to entry. So you can just go on Excel today and build what you want and deploy it to your local team by sending it around or using shared drives. But for us, our op model was, you need to go through a governance process now to get your app live. And that was an additional thing for them to kind of learn. And they just didn't understand some of the, why do I need to go through this process when I don't need to do that for Excel? And it's kind of, and that's okay, right? They're not from a digital background. They don't understand the risks involved in cloud computing. But I think, it's been a bit of a kind of educational journey for them. And also for us, right? We realized some of the processes that we were enforcing just weren't streamlined enough, right? So it was on us to fix that and make it easier for them to go live. It should be no harder for them to go live with, a Power App or a Mendix application than an Excel.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of just getting them changing their kind of what they're used to. Once they're used to it, then it'll come naturally to use the platform.
Absolutely, yeah.
And can you you mentioned to me that you guys are kind of building a learning academy around low code. Can you kind of tell us about that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually one of the things we're most excited about is training and development. And I think for us, we kind of started this journey and we relied on our vendors, and we are still heavily relying on our vendors to provide that training material, right? Because we don't want to curate our own material. The vendors know their tech best, right? So where we can, our strategy is to use training material provided by vendors. Mendix has its academy, Microsoft has Microsoft Learn, and the Enterprise Skills Initiative. So where we can, we want to use that, and it's great content, but there are gaps in it, right? And I think you'll find, at Rolls-Royce, there's a specific way of doing things. So we don't have all the connectors turned on, for example, and some of the training material says, go use this connector, and we blocked it, so you can't then do that training course. So for us, it was around, we've created some of our own material where we need to, but most of it's kind of vendor led. But then it's also around, how do colleagues find that material? So, Rolls-Royce has many divisions. We sit in civil aerospace. So this year it's all been, a really tight focus to bring the group together a little bit. We're going through a big transformation. We've had a new CEO come in. And so there's been, restructuring happening. And I think as part of that, we've, new people have come in with fresh ideas, and it's really refreshing to see, their thought on how learning and development works. So, I think we're bringing in a new learning experience platform, which will basically, you could go on there tomorrow and say, look, I want to build a dashboard that shows me X, Y, or Z. And it will create tailored, personalized training pathways for you to get to your outcome. So you no longer need to kind of figure out what you need to learn, and then you watch this video and it actually didn't tell you what you needed to know, so you go again. So really, really cool new tech, all AI powered, is coming in, and really kind of excited to see where that takes us. But for us, it's kind of tying in and saying, look, we want to formalize this a little bit, create tailored paths. And we have 1,000 sit devs today, and if we really truly want to scale, Rolls-Royce has 44,000 colleagues, right? I think we've got a bit to go yet. So I think training and development is the way to do that properly, right? We want to do it in a safe and robust, sustainable way. And I think learning and development has a key part to play in that. And I feel like it's been a bit of an afterthought for us up until now. So really taking that seriously.
Amazing. And you kind of mentioned what my next question was about, kind of AI. Everyone's talking about it, and I wanted to ask, you're using it. Can you dive into a bit more kind of how the business is using AI, and even things that you've kind of got planned for the future?
So Rolls-Royce, I guess, is committed to responsible AI, right? So I think a couple of years ago in 2021, we created a framework called the Alethea framework. So it's a toolkit for ethics and trustworthiness in AI, which is available to everyone, by the way. So you can Google it and get a copy if you want. So I think within civil aerospace, we have a, it's not a low code team, but it's a world leading PhD level data scientist team. So they're using, big data to solve really, really, really complex business problems. And for them, they've been using, AI. I think my favorite example is taking, Trent 700 data, overlaying that with flight path data and some weather data to understand what happens on our engines when you fly a certain flight path. So, taking billions of rows of data and really simulating it to figure out actually when you fly this path, because of weather conditions or the atmosphere, our engines get thrashed, right? And then using that kind of influence future business decisions, I think, all backed up by, our data. We use Databricks as our lakehouse architecture. So yeah, using a bunch of AI tools and data platforms that literally 2 years ago we just couldn't do, right? Because you can't do billions of rows of data on a localized machine, right? So yeah, we've got a wider digital team that's really using AI to kind of leverage that to solve business problems. I guess in the low code space, we use AI Builder mostly. So that's taking things like PDFs and extracting data from that and then storing it in a structured format, which I think is the first step really to getting our data right. So then we can start to utilize, generative AI, which is no doubt going to make its way to Rolls-Royce soon. So yeah, just kind of preparing for that.
Yeah. And I'm interested to know kind of your personal view on, there's this big discussion about will AI kind of get rid of low code? What's your kind of personal view on that? And do you think that's actually kind of possible?
So I think my view on it is that there'll always be a human in the loop. I think it will probably get you 80% there, right? We've had to play with the Power Platform version of it where you say, build me an app to request a hackathon or for my events thing. And it actually does a really good job, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the branding's slightly out. It doesn't give you a Rolls-Royce branded one, but yeah, it gets you 80% of the way. But then there's always going to need to be a human element in it to kind of, yes, it kind of made some assumptions that weren't quite right. And so I always feel like it'll never completely kind of do it on its own. I also feel like for me, it's going to be more of a, make our SIT devs or end users just more productive, right? But then there's a conversation around what do they do with that added time that they have, right? So if it makes them more productive, but then they have a 5-hour lunch, then that's much. But I think that's where we are, right? I guess going on to your other question around what's in the future and what's coming, I guess what's next. I think we are going to again look at co-pilots and how we roll that out right properly. And I always feel like there's two parts to co-pilots. There's co-pilots that make your authors and your developers more productive, but then it's those co-pilots that you can then use to interrogate your data. And I think both of them are equally as important and kind of interested to get more into that space.
Okay. Yeah, I think, it's interesting to see that obviously you guys are kind of already started doing stuff where a lot of businesses are still trying to work out, what they're going to do with AI and kind of, you guys are kind of already utilizing it as much as you can, which is really good to see. I'm interested to know kind of, any, it doesn't have to be low code, any other kind of interesting things, you're working on within the business that, that it's kind of really would be good to hear about.
Yeah, so I guess I would call it low code, but it's probably citizen development. But we have Power Platform as an app dev and BI tool. We have kind of Mendix coming on the scene. We've recently introduced a new tool called Data IQ. So that's taking, I guess, the really complex business problems I talked about, those PhD level data scientists, and democratizing that a little bit. So I think for us, data scientists in itself is a discipline that needs a bit of training and upskilling. And I think how do we and they save millions of pounds, by the way. These teams, every year they save, I think last year they did around 100 million in value benefit back to the business in solving business problems. So for us, it's kind of like, how do we do more of that? Because there's a problem with the data science team in that there's a finite number of them. It's a team of around 15, right? So if we want to take that goodness and kind of scale it out to the enterprise, we need a tool to help us do that. And so for us, we've recently bought a Data IQ. It's a citizen data science tool. So again, we've got it, and now we're going on this journey of upskilling people and showing them where it fits. And a very similar journey to what we went on 4 years ago with the Power Platform. Just it's a slightly different discipline because people just don't really understand data science as much as they do in app dev, for example. So yeah, I think for us, Data IQ is up there. But I think, I'm just trying to think if there is anything else we're looking at really in much more detail. I think for us, it's just getting the most out of the tools we already have. I think, rather than looking at the next thing right now, it's just utilizing them more.
Yeah. And just a final question about you personally, kind of, any kind of what you kind of looking forward to, kind of, any goals or things you want to achieve kind of in the future?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, so right now it is all around that learning and development space.
Yep.
I recently did a bunch of research on, skills and skills-based economies and, really cool tech out there around. I think one of the things that I guess what I'm really fortunate about is when I moved to the digital team, I was really fortunate in the sense that we had a bunch of leaders, and I was fortunate to be coached and mentored by some really inspirational leaders, right? And they really gave me the opportunities to, push me out of my comfort zone. And, I had this fear of public speaking, and they were like, right, you're going to do some conferences this year.
Nice.
And, it's just behind the scenes, they were pulling all the right strings to give me those opportunities. In fact, I don't think I'd be on this podcast right now, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I think for me, that was really instrumental for me to kind of progress in my career. And I think as I look forward, I think those people have since left the organization. So I kind of see it more that in the background, they were doing stuff that kind of get me those opportunities. And I think for me, I was so in my research, I was thinking about, how do I find people who are interested in this stuff, right? And whether that we have, so in Rolls-Royce, we have Workday as our HR system, and you can go in there and put your skills of this is what I'm interested in. These are the skills I have, or perhaps these are skills I want to acquire. And I was doing a bunch of research around how do we streamline that a little bit, maybe use AI. So Viva Engage is a kind of thing that has an inferencing engine. So yeah, for me, I think it's playing more in that learning and development space. I'd love to kind of build the next generation of sit devs. I think we've got to that bit where we've kind of our adoption is kind of new sit devs is kind of flatlining a little bit, which I don't think is a bad thing, by the way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having the same amount of sit devs, but just better quality of them.
Yeah.
But I do feel like over time, as people move around in the organization or leave the organization, we still need to look at, the next generation of sit devs. So for me, it's kind of figuring out how we do that, how we find them. And a lot of my job now is less technical. It's more people stuff. So we run in-person events. It's, it's all around community or practice sessions, guilds. And yeah, I think it's how do we build on it, I think.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm glad, you're here and, you've kind of been guided to kind of do something like this. So it's great to kind of have you and for you to share your insights with me. And I think it'd be definitely great to speak in the future again, especially once you've built some stuff with Mendix, where we can dive into it a bit deeper. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem, and thank you for having me. But yeah, absolutely, it'd be great to come back and share some lessons learned and how our journey was.
Yeah, it'd be great to, because obviously it's so early on. We could dive right into kind of the whole kind of journey of kind of what you've learned, what you've liked, what you haven't liked, what you've built. I think it would be really interesting to kind of talk about that again. So let's definitely speak again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Thanks, Sunny. Thank you for listening to today's episode, which is brought to you by iTrack. We are a leading staffing firm that solely specializes in supplying both contract and permanent low-code professionals to organizations globally. Navigating the niche landscape of the low-code market requires the best talent, and we recognize its critical importance for our clients. Whether you're a company looking to strengthen your team, an individual seeking the next career move, or someone entirely new to the world of low-code, we're here for you. Our extensive experience and in-depth market knowledge enables us to quickly pinpoint the ideal candidates while offering expert advice and support at every stage of your low-code journey. Reach out to us through our website or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to assist you. Thank you once again for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another insightful episode. Until then, take care.